All right, so when it comes to Bob Nightengale, he's put a lot of stuff out there over the years. He's been right about some things. He's also been very wrong about some things as well. We've even seen this man hand out bagels. In this video, I'm going to go over his latest article, the 10 biggest MLB hot stove questions from top free agents to the latest trade rumors. Let's go talk about it. All right, so he starts off with, will teams spend like usual or stash away money for a lockout fund? Now, he says here that one NLGM said that we had the same thing going on into the 2021 season and it didn't stop teams from spending. I don't see it having any effect. Now, I agree. You go back out to that lockout before Bob was handing out bagels down in Florida. You had the Rangers signing Corey Seager and Marcus Semien, Max Scherzer signing with the Mets, Javier Baez signing with the Tigers, Robbie Ray signing with the Mariners, and all of those were big money deals. In fact, Scherzer signed for the highest AAV for a pitcher ever, so I don't think you're going to see much of a difference here, especially since they're a year out. Now, when it comes to a possible lockout, I haven't touched much on it, but in my personal opinion, I think they're going to find a way to get it figured out in some way, shape, or form. In the end, there's just too much money at stake. Revenues and ratings are at an all-time high. I say they find a middle ground on some kind of a system with a cap or a floor or some kind of version with both. I don't know, whatever it is, but there's just too much at play here right now for both sides to let things slip into a lockout. On to the next question. Which teams will be the most aggressive? Now, he says here the Dodgers, the Mets, the Orioles, the Yankees, the Braves, and the Blue Jays. Now, I agree with all those. The Dodgers especially, they're going to be gunning for a three-peat next year. They have over $80 million coming off the books, and they have needs to fill, like an outfield spot and the bullpen. Now, coming into the offseason, I was thinking perhaps they would make more modest moves of the bullpen because they already have so much pitching. They spent big on Tanner Scott last year, but they really could use more stability at the back end of the bullpen. I mean, they had to use Roki Sasaki as their closer in the postseason, so I could see them going after a guy. They could have Tanner Scott be in the setup role. He's always been pretty solid in that role anyway, so why not go after a guy like Edwin Diaz, maybe Robert Suarez, Devin Williams, maybe even Ryan Helsley. I could definitely see them going after a closer. Now, the question is, are they going to go after Kyle Tucker? Now, I predicted Kyle Tucker to go to the Dodgers, and I still think that's a great fit, but if he's going to be out of the range of what they're willing to spend, I could definitely see them going out there, going after some big-time bullpen help, but also making a trade as well for someone like Steven Kwan or even Jarren Duran. Now, the Mets absolutely need to be aggressive, especially after their September collapse with the big payroll they have. They've had big expectations ever since Steve Cohen took over, and I think their offseason is going to be very interesting. Now, Stearns, he's going to be looking to improve the clubhouse culture, according to reports out there, and with Stearns always looking for value, I could see him getting very creative here this offseason, but most of all, they need to add someone to the top of the rotation. I think Joe Ryan could make a lot of sense, and they also have to figure out how they're going to replace Pete Alonso if he goes elsewhere. Now, the Orioles really need to have a big offseason. It felt like last year they focused more on quantity over quality, but this time around, Mike Elias needs to make moves for guys that he knows he can count on to stay healthy and improve their ceiling, especially at the top of the rotation. When it comes to the Yankees, they're always aggressive, and I don't see that being any different this time around. Now, they have holes in the bullpen to fill with the departure of Devin Williams and Luke Weaver, along with the outfield to figure out, so they got to figure out what's going to happen with Cody Bellinger, who was a great fit this past year. Do they bring him back, or do they go for someone with more ceiling like Kyle Tucker? Now, with the Braves, Alex Anthopoulos usually isn't the biggest spender in the offseason, but after coming off a down year, maybe they're looking to bring in a big name or two. He's also pulled off big trades in the past, so I could see them absolutely having a big offseason. Now, the bullpen wasn't great this past year, and the rotation did have injuries, so I could see him focusing a lot to add some good arms. Maybe he goes after Dylan Cease, someone that he's shown interest in the past. Now, the last team that he talks about here are the Blue Jays, and hey, they're always aggressive every single offseason, but after coming off a Game 7 loss in the World Series, I don't see that changing one bit. I could even see them putting their foot on the gas even more. Now, the big question is what happens with Bo Bichette? Are they going to bring him back? I could absolutely see that happening, but if he's going to be looking for shortstop money and the Blue Jays see him as more of a second baseman moving forward, are they going to be willing to pay him the big bucks, or will another team out there that really values his bat, that would be willing to play him at shortstop, give him more money? We're just going to have to wait and see what happens there, but I definitely could see him go back, and if he ends up leaving, that would really give the Blue Jays a lot more money to work with. Now, I definitely think another top of the rotation arm makes sense, especially with Kevin Gausman getting closer to free agency, and if Bo Bichette ends up leaving, well, I think they're going to have to add someone that can replace him, maybe someone at second base, and Andres Gimenez can move over to shortstop, someone like Gleyber Torres, maybe Ha-Seong Kim, maybe they can pull off a trade somewhere, or maybe they could throw their hat into the ring for Kyle Tucker. Now, some other teams he didn't mention were my Red Sox, who I fully expect to keep things going after a big offseason last year and making it back to the postseason this year. Dave Dombrowski's always busy, and he has a lot to figure out there with Schwarber hitting free agency. The Giants are always aggressive, and I expect Buster Posey to try and make things happen, especially after bringing in a new manager. And hey, the Mariners, they were just 8 outs away from a World Series, so maybe they decide to make some big moves. On to the next question. Which team could be the biggest sleeper this offseason? Now, Bob mentions the Cubs here, and he says they're going to be looking for another corner outfielder. Now, I don't think I agree with that because they have Owen Casey, who looked very good in the minor leagues this past year before getting called up, and I could see him getting more playing time. Maybe the Cubs look to add a right-handed bat to go along with him to take a bit more pressure off of him against lefties, so I think something like that could make sense, but I'm not expecting them to spend huge on a corner outfielder. I think they need to spend more on starting pitching, and he does talk about that here, saying that they will be shopping in the expensive aisle for starting pitching, with fellow GMs predicting they could land Framber Valdez and or Dylan Cease. Now, in my free agent predictions, I did predict Dylan Cease going to the Cubs because I think they need to add more stuff to the rotation, and even though Cease did have a high ERA this past year compared to his usual numbers, he still has some of the best strikeout numbers in the game. Now, for me, my sleeper team would be the Braves. They have a lot of payroll space this offseason. They reset the CBT last year, and they have more money than you would think because they are a publicly traded company. I could see them definitely making a splash, especially with Alex Anthopoulos always looking to make moves. I would also say the Reds are a bit of a sleeper. Now, they're not going to go out there and spend a lot of money, but they haven't made a big signing in a while, so now that they're back in a competitive window with Terry Francona going into his second season as manager, I could see them being very motivated to bolster this team, especially the lineup that needs some bats. On to number 4, where will Kyle Tucker, Bo Bichette, and Alex Bregman land? Starting off with Kyle Tucker, he mentions GMs predict that he's going to sign with the Dodgers, Yankees, or the Blue Jays, and I really think either of them could be a landing spot. You always got to look out for the Dodgers with all the money they have. They have a need in the outfield, but I do wonder if they think they've already done their heavy lifting and they look to spend in other areas, like I mentioned earlier with the bullpen. They need a bit more stability back there. Now, the Yankees, I could see happening as well because they lost out on Juan Soto last offseason, and they did show interest in Kyle Tucker before he was traded to the Cubs. Then again, Bellinger was a great fit this past year. His bat fit well at Yankee Stadium, and the versatility, I think, is going to be good for the Yankees moving forward. He can play in the outfield or first base, so I think he's a good fit overall there. And he would be cheaper, but maybe they see more upside in Tucker. Now, when it comes to the Blue Jays, we talked about that earlier, and I could see that, but they have other question marks right now, including Bo Bichette. I think they need to add to the rotation. Now, if Bo Bichette ends up going elsewhere, I said earlier they would have more money to play with, so maybe they can get serious for Tucker there. Now, I'll also throw the Phillies into this mix as well, especially if Kyle Schwarber ends up leaving. I think they could use an upgrade in right field over Nick Castellanos. I think you always have to look out for the Giants as well. They could use another upgrade in the outfield, and maybe they could sell Tucker on going there, especially after hiring Tony Vitello. Now, as for Alex Bregman, Bob thinks he ends up staying with the Red Sox, and I think he goes back to Boston too. I could see the Tigers, Phillies, or the Mets showing interest as well, but the Red Sox need him the most. Now, when it comes to Bo Bichette, Bob says it's expected that he stays with the Blue Jays, and I think they have the edge to bring him back, but the Tigers really need bats in that lineup, or maybe the Dodgers can make things interesting as well. Number 5, does Pete Alonso finally find a permanent home with the Mets? He says nope right off the bat, and he expects David Stearns to move on because he wants to focus more on run prevention after missing the postseason this year. Now, I could see that for sure. Remember last offseason, they barely got a contract done, and with Alonso's defense not great at first base, I could see Stearns looking to improve that, and I think he's going to get creative with this roster in a bunch of little ways. I think they do need to add someone to the top of the rotation, someone they can count on every 5th day, but I could also see him looking to improve the defense along with adding more versatility to the team. And he also says here that GMs are predicting the perfect landing spot for Alonso must be the Red Sox, and I've been on record saying this a million times. I think he's a perfect fit in Boston. They need a middle-of-the-order power bat after only ranking 15th in home runs and only 29th in OPS in the cleanup spot. Now, he's played in a big market, so I think he could handle Boston very well, and when Tristan Casas comes back, they could just share first base and DH. Number 6, will Tarek Skubal or Paul Skenes get traded? No and no, Bob says. Now, he says here with the Pirates that they won't even listen on proposals for Skenes, so don't even bother calling. Then he says says here about Skubal, the Tigers will at least listen on Skubal, but would have to be completely overwhelmed. Now, I agree with both. I don't think the Pirates are going to trade Skenes. Now, can you make the argument that they should? Absolutely. But I think what's more likely is they actually go out there and try to get some bats, to try and give him some run support, to try and put a competitive team out there. It's not, every day that you get a guy like Paul Skenes at the top of your rotation. The Pirates should be doing everything they can to try and support him and try to win more games. For crying out loud, Bob Nutting, please sign the checkbook for a couple of bats, for crying out loud. My goodness, Bob Nutting. But for the Tigers, I agree as well. For me personally, I think they need to sign him to an extension. It's just crazy that they would just let him go. He's about to win his second straight Cy Young. He's the best pitcher on the planet right now. I think you could say Paul Skenes and Tarek Skubal are 1-2 when it comes to the best pitchers in baseball. I think the Tigers, they should sign him to an extension, and they have the money. Don't think the Tigers don't have any money. They could absolutely sign Skubal to the extension, but they can't get cute about it. They need to put a big offer on the table. Make him the richest pitcher of all time and throw that down for Scott Boras. Make it to the point where it's going to be hard for Boras to turn it down. Now, I will say this, with Boras, he wants his guys to get to free agency, but I think if the Tigers put a good effort and really put down a good offer and they still say no, then yeah, I think you should pick up the phone when someone's calling, listen to what teams would give you, because he would bring in a lot. Teams would absolutely have to give up a good package for him because he's going to put up very good numbers and he's not going to cost you a ton in arbitration. So the trade surplus value is going to be very high with Skubal, even if it's for only 1 year. So yeah, I think the Tigers should listen, but I think more so they need to put a very good offer on the table for a long-term deal. Number 7, will the Phillies keep Kyle Schwarber? Now, he basically says here that even though the Phillies lost a ton of money last year because of luxury tax hits, that they need to keep Schwarber, and I agree. The next guy up in home runs for them was Bryce Harper with 27, so that would be a huge hit in the power department, and couple that with the fact that he has a great relationship with the organization and the city, it just seems like a perfect fit all the way around. However, I'll play devil's advocate here. Now, in the end, business is business, and they have been over the CBT for 4 straight years now without a championship to show for it. Now, I know John Middleton wants to win, but I can't help but wonder if he thinks they got to do something different without adding a ton of payroll, since they already have a lot of it. Now, of course, they could clear some, and I think they could move Nick Castellanos somewhere, but they're going to have to eat some of that contract, so it wouldn't be $20 million off the books completely. And also, could they move Taijuan Walker? Maybe, but even so, he's an underwater contract too, so they're going to have to eat some of that as well. And also, Aiden Miller is getting closer to Major League ready, so maybe they look to move Alec Boehm. That would be around $10 million coming off the payroll for next year, so maybe they could move him. Let's say they move all 3 while eating half of Castellanos' and Walker's contract. That would be about $30 million off the books, which would put them a little under the CBT. So they could just use the savings for Schwarber, but I wonder what the limit is going to be there. Now, if the Phillies do bow out, then I could absolutely see the Red Sox being players. He was with them in 2021. They need a power bat in the middle of the order, and the Red Sox seem very interested in bringing Schwarber back to Boston, according to the recent reports. Maybe the Cubs could look for a reunion, and the Tigers could use a bat there too. Number 8, is Munetaka Murakami the real deal? Now, he points out what we already know: big time power coming out of Japan, but a very high strikeout rate, low contact percentage, and trouble against higher velo. Now, he also points out here that scouts also believe he's more ideal as a third baseman than a first baseman, and I disagree with that. Rob Bradford of the Baseball Isn't Boring podcast said recently that he's talked with executives around Major League Baseball, and they say it's going to be a hard no for him playing at third base, and to me, that's pretty obvious. He's a big guy to start with, and his defense at third base hasn't gotten the greatest reviews over the years coming out of Japan, so I'm not sure what Bob is really talking about here. Did one person tell him this? I'm not so sure, but I see more of a first baseman or a DH with Murakami, so I'll leave it at that. Now, when it comes to the bat, I do think he needs to go somewhere where they emphasize better plate discipline to help further his development. Now, teams that have done well with limiting the strikeouts over the last few years with an opening at first base are the Padres, Guardians, or the Diamondbacks. If the Astros move on from Christian Walker after a down year, maybe they could be a fit. If a team was okay with playing him at third base, maybe the Blue Jays. Number 9, who's on the MLB trade block? Now, he lists a bunch of names. names. He's got Joe Ryan and Pablo Lopez, Hunter Green, Ketel Marte, Sandy Alcantara, Fernando Tatis Jr., Sonny Gray, Christian Walker, Nolan Arenado, Freddie Peralta, Mackenzie Gore, Stephen Kwan, Jarren Duran, Edward Cabrera, Mitch Keller, Luis Severino, and Spencer Jones. All right, so I'll start off with the names that I disagree with. I don't see the Diamondbacks trading Ketel Marte. I know there's been reports of his behavior in the clubhouse, but I don't know. It didn't seem like teammates were really bothered by it by any means. There were teammates that were sticking up for him, but regardless, he's a great player on a cheap deal, so why would the Diamondbacks even consider this when they're trying to compete? Now, when it comes to Sandy, I think the only way he gets moved if the Marlins get a great offer they can't turn down, because he is coming off an up and down year, and they took a step forward this past year. Same goes for Edward Cabrera that he mentioned here. I think the Marlins would rather keep those guys in the fold because Sandy is on a team-friendly deal. Edward Cabrera is in his arbitration years, so they're not going to cost a ton, and the Marlins, they need to keep the best parts of their team right now and try to add to it. I could see them looking to add some cheaper veterans to help bolster the team a little bit, keep this pitching staff intact, and I think they could be a team to look out for next year. Now, when it comes to Fernando Tatis Jr., I would be shocked if the Padres moved him. Now, I can see a side where maybe they need to create more payroll flexibility, especially since they're not going to be able to move Manny Machado or Xander Bogaerts' contracts, and Tatis would bring back a very big package, but he's so good on a pretty solid deal. Now, for the ones that I agree with, I could see Sonny Gray and Nolan Arenado because the Cardinals are going into a bit of a reset. Chaim Bloom's running the front office now, so I could see him looking to give them a bit more payroll flexibility for the next few years to help set themselves up to get back into things. I definitely see the Twins moving on from Joe Ryan after their fire sale, and he's only a couple of years away from free agency. I think the Red Sox, Mets, Orioles, or the Cubs make the most sense since they need starting pitching, and they have enough prospects to deal. Now, with Pablo Lopez, I'm 50-50 on him, actually, because he is on a friendly deal, and since the Twins have a lot of good young talent there, maybe they would like to keep him atop the rotation to try and compete, and if they're out of it at the deadline, maybe they can look into moving him then, but as always, anyone can be moved at the right price. I could also see the Astros moving Christian Walker now that they brought back Carlos Correa. Where are you going to play Isaac Paredes? I don't really see him as much of a second baseman. I think first base would be a better home for him, so maybe Christian Walker could be a change of scenery candidate. He didn't have a great first year with the Astros, so Isaac Paredes, he could slide over to the first base, and then Christian Walker, they can clear that salary, get some prospects back for him, and then maybe they could use that money to go after another guy out there. Now, Jarren Duran, I could absolutely see the Red Sox looking to move him, or Wilyer Abreu. They just have too many major league outfielders at this point. Jarren Duran, Wilyer Abreu, Roman Anthony, Sadam Rafaela. They also got Masataka Yoshida in the mix as well. So I do think Duran or Wilyer are going to end up getting moved. I think Duran, he's going to bring back more because his projections are just higher over the next few years. He's going to give you a lot of extra base hits, a little bit of pop with speed. Now, with Wilyer, he's got good power from the left side and good defense out in right field, just won a Gold Glove, but that makes me think the Red Sox would rather keep him because he has another year of control compared to Duran, and with right field out in Fenway Park, that's a tough place to play, so I think they would rather hang on to Wilyer moving forward and see what they can get for Duran, and they should be able to get a lot back for Duran. Mitch Keller, I could definitely see the Pirates moving him. They got a lot of pitching there, especially a lot of young pitching. He's a solid veteran guy on a pretty decent deal overall, so if they can get back a bat for Mitch Keller, I could definitely see them doing that. Now, with Spencer Jones, I could maybe see the Yankees moving him, especially if they bring back Cody Bellinger or sign Kyle Tucker. Now, with Jones, he's got high power potential, a lot of strikeouts, but I can see the power being pretty intriguing, and maybe the Yankees would rather get back a more established guy. Could you maybe use Spencer Jones in a trade with the Cardinals, perhaps? Maybe for someone like Brendan Donovan, that's a guy that could be their leadoff hitter moving forward. Just an idea, but I think Spencer Jones could be on the table. Now, when it comes to Mackenzie Gore, Stephen Kwan, and Luis Severino, I'm going to pause a little bit on those guys. Now, I could see the Nationals moving Gore for sure. He is getting closer to free agency, and they do need a bit of a reset there. But with Paul Taboni just taking over, I wonder if maybe he wants to wait a bit, be a bit more patient when it comes to evaluating everything. But then again, you could make the argument that you should trade Gore now while his value's high and get back a nice package of prospects for the Nationals to help them over the next couple of years. So I think it could go either way. way with Mackenzie Gore. Now, Stephen Kwan, I could see him on the block. He was on the trade block at the trade deadline, and with the Guardians, they have moved guys before they've gotten to free agency before. So Kwan, I definitely think could be a guy. I think the Dodgers make a lot of sense. I think Kyle Tucker makes a ton of sense for them, but if they don't want to spend the money for him, then why not Stephen Kwan? I could definitely see that. Or maybe Jarren Duran. I think one of those guys could be a pretty nice fit. And Luis Severino, he has talked about his displeasure pitching in Sacramento at Sutter Health Park. He's pitched very well on the road, but in Sacramento, he hasn't pitched all that great. But he's on this contract here, and with the A's, they got a very good lineup. They just need more pitching. So do they want to get rid of their best pitcher overall right now? I'm not so sure about that. And for the last question, he asks here if trades will go down at the general manager meetings. Now, he says probably not, and I agree. We usually don't see trades at the GM meetings, but I think maybe you could see something between teams that talked at the deadline but didn't get anything done. Say the Dodgers for Stephen Kwan, like I just mentioned. Joe Ryan and the Red Sox, they were talking at the deadline. Maybe Mitch Keller and the Orioles, they had some talks going on as well. But I doubt anything gets done right now because I think teams are still just trying to get a feel for the market. That's kind of the whole point of the GM meetings, right? You're breaking bread, you're talking ideas, you're kind of laying down some groundwork right now, getting a feel for everything. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. What do you think of what Bob had to say in this article? Let me know your thoughts about free agency trades going into the offseason here. Let me know down below in the comments. But everybody, that's all I got for right now. If you're kind of the way out, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new, and I'll talk to you next time.